from yesterday? What do you remember from yesterday? Either put it in the chat or go off of mute. What did we cover yesterday? Biggest reason for conflict is assumptions. Yes, thank you, Kanchan. Five methods of conflict resolution and keep trying to apply different methods. Very good. In general, especially when dealing with devotees, assume good intentions. Thank you, Harshit. Very good. Just give it another few seconds, see if anyone has other things to add. Conflicts come from unclear role and ego. Yes. Thank you for that about unclear roles. Uh, Collaborating ways to solve the conflict, observe, not interpret, or at least know when you're interpreting and when you're just neutrally observing. Yes. Discussed about conflicts over information, resources, relationships. Five things for dealing with conflict. Very good. Okay, I feel that I didn't waste my time yesterday. We uh, we had some success. I want to I wasn't going to talk about this, but it's so important. And Rajiv Chatterjee brought up a really great point. Conflicts come from unclear role and ego. So there is and I'll put it in the chat if I can remember what it is. Uh, yes, GRPI, Grippy. There is a model called Grippy where it says, and this is now we're talking about groups because one thing Sundar Gopal Prabhu asked me to talk about today is team building. So we're going to talk about, he also asked me to talk about communication skills. So we're going to talk about questions, listening, the mentality of a leader or manager, a youth preacher, when it comes to dealing with conflicts, and then about team building. And this Grippy is interesting. The goals, roles, um, processes, and interpersonal. I'm putting it in the chat. And it's counterintuitive. It's not the way we normally think, but this says that uh, 80% of the conflicts in groups is when the goal is not clear. Now, we might say, well, our goal is clear. We want to make devotees, youth people, devotees, but then maybe there's a little bit more specific goals that we may not be clear in our preaching. And if the goals are clear, then of the remaining 20%, 80% of the problem usually is about unclear roles or competition over roles. Who's going to be in charge? Who does this? Who does that? And then of the remaining 20% of that, 80% is processes or just how we go about doing our service. I'm going to put yeah. Thank you for being on mute. How we go about managing our team. And then only not very much of it is just purely interpersonal. So it's an interesting way to look at group dynamics. So that is not what the main point I was going to make today, but because it came up naturally um, in Rajiv Chatterjee's point, then I thought I would just bring it up. It's an interesting thing that we could talk about for a long time, but let's focus on what we're going to talk about today. So I'll share my screen. Um, oh, 1 second. Okay. Share. Okay. All right. So continuing. So here's the first thing I want you to do. Think of some challenge in your life. It could be something really small. It could be something really big. It could be, you struggled, you want to get up at 3 in the morning, but you barely make it from Mangalarti, or you take too much prasadam, or whatever, you don't get along with one of the other brahmacharis, or whatever the situation. Just think of some kind of challenge in your life. Okay. Give you a few seconds to think of that. Get that in your mind and how you have been dealing with it right now. Okay. And everyone has some challenge. Come on, Dukalaya Mashashvatam, Anityam Asukam Loka. Krishna promises us that we have some challenges in our life. So you all have them. We all have them. I have 500 of them. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question. Thinking about that challenge and how you've dealt with it up till now, what's the real challenge here? What is the real challenge here for you in that situation? Think about that for a few seconds. What's the real challenge here? Okay, now I'm going to ask you a second question. Are you ready? You have what's the real challenge here? Okay. Here's the second question. And what else? What else is the real challenge in this situation? What else? Maybe think a little deeper. What else is the real challenge in this situation? Think about that for a few seconds. Okay. And I'm going to ask you one last question. Very tricky question. Are you ready? And what else? What else is the real challenge in this situation? Maybe even going a little deeper. What else is going on? Okay, now for many of you, and maybe even most of you, the answer, what you were first thinking about the challenge, and then the answer to the first question is different than the answer to the third question, right? Because you thought about it a little bit more and thought more about the cause and the situation. For many of you, maybe not everyone, but for many of you. And so when we're preaching, we're often dealing with people's challenges or their situation up in that before the first question or at the first question. And the real situation, the real thing that's causing the challenge is often quite deeper. So we may be giving our advice to the wrong problem, or at least to not the real problem. So it's kind of like, where they say, we may quote so many good shlokas and everything, but we're not actually addressing the real problem. So it's kind of like when they say the operation was successful, but the patient died. Right? So, so we have to be careful about making assumptions that the first thing that a person let's say we're trying to really help a youth become a devotee, right? And so they tell us about some challenge in their life. That may not be the whole story. And so if we really want to help them, we may have to listen to them somewhat more I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a brahmachari, this was like 1979. I was the Sankirtan leader, and one day one of the brahmacharis came up to me and he just said, "Prabhu, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving the ashram." And so I just assumed it was, come on, he's a brahmachari, a young man. I just assumed it had to do with a Mataji. So I started preaching really heavy, fifth canto, Pungsastri, Amituni Bhava, Metaman, etc., like that. And all the verses about, sex life and things like that. And he just said, Hare Krishna, and he left. Then I found out about a month and a half later, one of our devotees went to visit him. And what actually happened was his parents got in a car accident and they were injured, not terribly injured, but injured. And they own a farm, and he felt very guilty about not helping out with the farm while his parents were getting better. So that's what he did. He went to help out, but I didn't ask any questions. I didn't even let him pretty much get a word in. I just kept preaching. So then we actually came up with a solution. On Mondays, the Sankirtan devotees used to have that day off. So 20 of us, 20 brahmacharis, we went up every Monday and helped out with the farm, and he moved back into the ashram. But the point was that I solved the wrong problem. So we have to be, we have to be careful about that. So the what we're going to talk about now is about being a good listener. No, first we're going to talk about asking good questions, and then about being a good listener. So questions are so powerful, right? You know, uh, the Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 5 is the ultimate question shloka, right? Right? Where Sutta Goswami says, "O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna, and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self." Now, of course, this is in the context of the Bhagavatam, but still, questions are so powerful. And then in the purport, Prabhupada says the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya are proper and just because they pertain to Lord Krishna, the absolute truth. Or in our case, we're also talking about service to Lord Krishna. And Prabhupada also writes in the Gita 15:15 says that in all the Vedas there's nothing but the urge for searching after him, Lord Krishna. Thus, the questions that pertain to Krishna are the sum and substance of all Vedic inquiries. And also from this wonderful purport, the whole world is full of questions and answers. The birds, beasts, and men are all busy in the matter of perpetual questions and answers. In the morning, the birds in the nest become busy with questions and answers. The human being, unless he is fast asleep at night, is busy with questions and answers. The businessmen in the market are busy with questions and answers. And so also the lawyers in the court and the students in the schools and colleges. The legislators in the parliament are also busy with questions and answers, and the politicians and the press representatives are all busy with questions and answers. Although they go on making such questions and answers for their whole lives, they are not at all satisfied. Satisfaction of the soul can only be obtained by questions and answers on the subject of Krishna. And Prabhupada was he really loved this question that's Sanatan Goswami asked Lord Chaitanya. Just Kayami, the most basic question, who am I? Right? Prabhupada really appreciated that he's such a learned person, Sanatan Goswami, and he goes up to Lord Chaitanya so humbly, Kayami, who am I? Such a powerful question, who am I? And of course, the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks 17 main questions in the Bhagavad Gita. And there's so many powerful questions in the Gita. Dhritarashtra's question, the first, Prabhupada writes in the purport how he explains so nicely when he says, Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva, right? That my people and your people, the Pandus, what did they do? And in one sense, this question leads to the whole Bhagavad Gita. How powerful, right? Or Arjuna, a very intelligent question, right? The sun god Vibhishwan is senior to you. How is it that you instructed him? It's a very valid question. And then, as we know from that chapter, it gives Krishna the chance to talk about himself, right? So very powerful questions. And of course, Maharaj Parikshit asked so many great questions of Sukadeva Goswami. Sanaka Rishi and the other rishis asked so many great questions of Sutta Goswami. Just a few of them, right? Since Krishna, the master of all mystics, has departed, please tell us with whom religious principles have now gone for shelter, right? That's such a very powerful question, and we know the answer, that they found shelter in the Bhagavatam. Sanaka also asked the transcendental acts and magnificent and gracious and great learned sages like Narada sing of them. Please therefore speak to us who are eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. So this is from the first chapter, right? One of the 6 questions of the sages of Naimisharanya. And in one sense, the whole Bhagavatam answers this question. Tell us about the various incarnations. The king asked Sukadeva Goswami, where and when did the meeting and discussion take place between Saint Vidura and His Grace Maitreya Muni? So that question leads to a whole canto, or almost 2 cantos of the Bhagavatam, just that one question. So questions are so powerful. And sometimes we ask questions to increase the relationship, right? So Angira Muni asks, O King Chitraketu, I can observe that your mind is not pleased. You seem not to have achieved your desired goal. Is this because of you yourself, or has it been caused by others? Your pale face reflects your deep anxiety. And then Sukadeva Goswami says that the great sage, that Angira already knew the answer. He knew everything, but still he asked the question. Because it developed this great rapport, this relationship with Chitraketu. So questions, are so powerful in so many different ways. And of course, Guyam Akyati Prichtati, that, this idea of asking questions and inquiring confidentially with close friends is such a important part of bhakti, actually. It's so important that all of us have some friendships in Krishna consciousness. It doesn't have to be hundreds. Even if it's 2 or 3, 1 or 2 or 3 devotees that we can fully reveal our mind to, fully reveal our heart to, even our deepest, darkest secrets, and know that they're not going to go on the internet and tell everyone else about it. That is such a important part, actually, of making advancement in devotional service. Ramachandra Sangamage, Narottama Das, right? That Narottama Das, he includes in this whole list of great souls his good friend Ramachandra, right? And Prabhupada would talk about his good friend Ananda Prabhu. And so it's important that we are able to reveal our mind in confidence and inquire confidentially. So questions, even on this, I like to talk about friendship as a verb. It's a noun, it's a thing, but I like to think of it as a verb because sometimes you have to work at friendships. You have to, if you don't have close friends, and you try to find someone who's kind of swajati, similar, like-minded, and serve with them, or serve them for some prasadam, or talk to them. Find a way to have friends. It's very difficult to make rapid advancement in Krishna consciousness without some good friendships. Some good friendships, yes. So when we're asking questions, they should be genuine. We should care about the answer. Be really interested in the other person. Don't assume, remember we talked about assumptions, that we know the answer. And if you remember the iceberg yesterday, we're listening not just for positions, but for interests. What's underneath the iceberg? What's really fueling their life, or their concerns, or their conflicts, or their questions? So so we should be sincere. In so many places in Prabhupada's purports, he talks about the most important thing for a devotee is to be serious and sincere. So sincerity in our relationships with others is important. We should. It's not just making a devotee and everyone will be happy we made a devotee or made a youth person, but it's actually sincerely caring for that spirit soul, for that part and parcel of Mamai Vangso Jiva Loke, that potential devotee of Krishna, and really trying to fan that spark of their devotion. People will pick up on that if we really have a sincere desire to help them come closer to Krishna. Even one time, we talk about the high levels of Krishna consciousness. And one time, Rameshwar Prabhu wrote to Srila Prabhupada, and he said, the Manjaris and the other gopis, they are, their mood is to push other gopis closer to Krishna, and ultimately, of course, Srimati Radharani. And so, is that the mood of Sankirtan? And Prabhupada wrote back, yes, that is the mood of Sankirtan. Not that we have to run to Krishna, but pushing others and helping them come closer to Krishna. So that mood of sincerity, so important for us as preachers of Krishna consciousness. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Now, some of you probably have heard this story before. So if you have, don't give it away. But a person walks into a shop and says something to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper takes out a gun and points it to the man's head. The man says, "Thank you very much," and he leaves the shop. What happened? And you can only ask closed-ended questions, questions that are answered yes or no. So ask me, go off of mute or put in the chat, what questions do you have for me to find out what actually happened? And you can only ask yes or no questions. Don't be shy. There's 50 of you.
Okay, I can try. My voice is
Yes, go
coming,
ahead.
Prabhuji.
Yes.
So I can say like, was that person wanted to kill you?
Now I can't hear you so well.
So I can ask that, was that person wanted to kill you?
Did that person want to kill? No. What was the question? Some people didn't hear. The person walks into the shop, says something to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper points a gun at his head. He says thank you, and he walks out of the shop. The question is, what happened? What did he say to the shopkeeper? And the first question was, did he want to kill him? And the answer was no. What else? And you can only ask yes or no questions.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I think he
Yes,
said
Mataji?
that if my death is destined by your hands, then you can kill me. I think so.
Yeah, no, that's not what happened. What else? He might have asked if you have defense. No?
Hare Krishna, Guruji.
Yes?
We can ask, did you say something wrong?
Did he say something wrong? No? Okay, are you mad? No. He might have said, I am the owner of the shop. No. So we could go on for probably until the next yuga, and you probably won't get the answer by asking yes or no questions. So what he said was, do you have a cure for the hiccups? Because when you have the hiccups, sometimes you scare somebody and the hiccups go away. So what we're trying to show here is that closed-ended questions that are answered yes or no don't get you very much information. So let's talk about the alternative. So open-ended questions help the other person think more clearly, and they also help a lot more information to come. And they usually begin with what or how. And of course, you translate that into Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, whatever language that you're preaching in. Right. So here's, someone is saying about, so you say, how is that working for you? Or now this doesn't begin with what or how, but it's just like, tell me more. It's a great question. What's your goal here? Someone's dealing with a situation in their life. What's your goal here? Now, isn't that kind of question that really gets the other person thinking? You see the difference between what's your goal here and do you have a goal? Do you have a goal is closed-ended. It's yes or no. But what's your goal here is open-ended. And the one that we used before, what's the real challenge here for you? A great question to ask people you're preaching to. What are the possibilities here? What are you not willing to change? Somebody really wants to become a devotee, but they have some hesitation. And so you can ask them, well, what are you not willing to change? And then that you probably get a lot of information from a question like that. What holds you back? It's kind of similar to that. What options do you see? How do you feel you've been treated? What might others see? How might others see this situation? So really getting them to get out of just thinking about themselves and thinking about, well, how would others look at this situation? So you see, these are very powerful questions when you think about them. And of course, there's many more. Just begin, if you could begin with what or how, and of course, translate it appropriately into the language that you're preaching in. That's open-ended. And it simultaneously gets you a lot more information. So make sure that when you give advice, you're giving the right advice. But it also helps a lot of these questions force the other person to think more clearly. So sometimes we're helping people helping people help themselves. A lot of these questions help people think more clearly. Or in terms of the Bhagavad Gita, when we're having a challenge in our life, it's often we're affected by rajas and tamas. And a lot of these questions help a person think in a more sattvic way, because introspection is sattvic, right? And we know from the Gita, sattva sanjayate jnanam, right? That from the mode of goodness, knowledge comes. So often we can even help people without even preaching to them. They start seeing things more clearly. They start seeing things in a more Krishna conscious way, just by asking them good questions. So, what questions do you have about questions? Yes, Vilas Padmanabh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, these are very nice thing about open-ended question. Whereas I see that when we are meeting with the old students, like those who are already in our connection and serving, so these open-ended questions are gradually become less, and I assume that what he is speaking, he will give some excuse, so many stories, reasons. So better to avoid it and give him some corrections or improvement so that he can be helped. So
So I'm confused. Let me see if I understand. So these are people that have are really becoming devotees, right?
Yes, Prabhuji, like
You
1 year,
seem
2
to
year in
say
connection.
you seem to say that they cause more problems than the new people.
No, like
No.
when I want to ask Prabhuji, like 2, 3 years has been passed with him.
Mhm.
He is under my counseling or my care. So now to tendency to keep more open-ended question is less because I think that I know him, he will give some
Oh yeah.
stories, some excuses, and so better avoid that, give him some solution, and so these things happen. So how to reconcile it?
No, that make yes, you will know more about that person. Um, but that those devotees also have challenges in their life. So you may not ask certain open-ended questions that you already know the answer to, right? Right? But like I have friends who, like I mentioned, yeah, I have some friends I've known for 50 years, and I can still ask them certain, if I hear they're going through some difficulty. So, how's it going with that? How are you doing with that? Right? Or yeah, what's your plan? That's an open-ended question. So yes, if we look at, let me go back to the screen for a second. So yes, some of these we might not ask because we already kind of know the answer, like you know, what holds you back, or how you feel you've been treated. We might know the answers to a lot of those questions or what the goal is, but there's usually a new challenge in their life. And so we might still say, tell me more about that, or how's that working for you? Um, mm, uh, what's the real, what are the possibilities here that you're thinking of in dealing with this situation? So I see your point, but it just might be we choose different questions. But we're still, what open-ended questions do also, it's like putting a nice clear mirror in front of the other person so that they can see things clearly. Or another way, in the what is that? It's in the Harinam Chintamani, where it talks about the clouds and the fog. I think the clouds are aparads and the fog is something else. Like if someone remembers the Harinam Chintamani. So we're kind of helping the clouds in their mind part, and they can see things more clearly. So yes, you're right. Some questions you won't ask anymore because you know them really well. But other things, it's also, these questions also are empowering. You know, um, that point about helping people help themselves. It's or Srila Prabhupada's maybe his most famous letter, right? At least the most famous letter on management, his letter to Karandar Prabhu, right, where he said that we want to make devotees independently thoughtful. Now this word independence, like, oh my God, no, 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 no. But someone who's really independently thoughtful is so strong in their Krishna consciousness that they understand Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, they accept authority, but they can go out and start a new center or do things because we've helped to make them strong in their bhakti. So the goal of a leader or a preacher or people who are counseling is not that we keep them dependent upon them for the whole life, but we train them so that they can go out and don't have to rely on us so much. You know, in that's the traditional idea of Gurukul. A child comes to at 5 years old to the Gurukul, and either 16 or 25, Prabhupada said different things. The guru has transferred their ability of discrimination and understanding and how to act in this world so that when the child who's now an adult leaves the Gurukul, that they're not just clutching onto the guru in terms of like, what do I do now? They know how to lead their life. So a lot of this thing about open-ended questions and what we're talking about is helping people slowly, slowly mature so that they can start counseling others. I hope that makes sense, because that was definitely the letter of Srila Prabhupada's letter to Karandar Prabhu. Someone maybe can put it in the chat, the famous letter. It's very long, so there's one section, it talks about independently thoughtful, and that Krishna consciousness is, what is it, IVS? What is it? Individual, voluntary, what does the S stand for? I can't remember. But, very much in that mood of empowering. But as you're saying, Prabhu, in the beginning, we really have to hold people's hands, right? I once asked a Franciscan monk, a kind of a famous person named Richard Rohr, and he's I think he's still alive. He's probably in his 70s, but he trained a lot of monks in Christianity, and he said that it's a gradual process to make a mature monk. And in the beginning, it's very regimented. You should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And only after, some time, slowly, you give them a little independence until eventually they're mature. I hope that's okay. And I got into a little bit more than you asked in the question.
Yes, Prabhuji. No, Prabhuji,
All
it
right,
is
thank you.
required. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Saroj Mukha Madhav Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So, Prabhuji, many times, many open-ended questions starting from why. Many times it seems confrontational. Like why you did like this? Why did you not? So, can we go for that, or are there some better ways of asking such things?
Very good question. If you notice, we don't use the word why, we use what or how. For that very reason that you said, sometimes why sounds like you're a police investigating an FIR or something, right? What,
Yes.
so we use what or how, and also, Prabhu, as you're pointing out, is our tone of voice is so important, right? What do you think you should do? That's very different than, oh, so Prabhu, what do you think you should do in this situation? So the tone of voice is very important. I was going to talk about this later, but since you bring it up, maybe I'll skip to it now. 1 second. Yes, it's right here. So in communicating emotions, only 7% is the words we choose, but the tone of voice is so important. And the body language is, oh, can you see that? Maybe you can't, it says you can't see that. Anyway, I'll
Not
just say it.
visible, Prabhuji.
What's that?
Not visible, Prabhuji.
Okay. How about
Yes,
now?
Prabhuji. No.
Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So the point here is not that the words aren't important, but the tone of voice conveys a lot. And our body language also, have you ever been talking to someone and you can see by their body language they don't understand what you're saying? They don't get it? So body language speaks a lot. So yes, Prabhu, that was very, very wise comment that you're making, that we don't want to sound like an investigator. We want to sound more like empathic, compassionate, concerned, the kind of the way that Prabhupada would speak to the devotees, especially in the early days when he was personally, guiding them in Krishna consciousness. So yes, people will pick up on that, on the, that's almost another part of the iceberg. That 25% of the iceberg is the skills, like using open-ended questions and things like that. But the 75% is having compassion, being a instrument of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being in the mood of Sankirtan, and being in the mood of really trying to help this person develop their love for Krishna. And And when you combine those two, some good techniques and the right mood, the right bhav, then it's really successful. You know, in the Nectar, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami talks about Chesta Rupa and Bhava Rupa. Of course, he talks about it on a high level of Krishna consciousness, but we can also talk about it on our level that, you know, Chesta Rupa is the activities of bhakti, going out and, you know, preaching, using some of the techniques that we're learning. And those are super helpful. But we also need the bhava, right? The mood of devotion. And sometimes we're very expert at the chesta, and people even praise us. Oh, you've done so good. You distributed so many books, or this or that. But we may need to work more deeply on the bhava rupa, because sometimes we get kind of absorbed in the externals. So thank you so much, Saroj Mukha Madhav Prabhu. That was a great question. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, let's move on. I think there is a question. What to do in a scenario where one person is hesitant to open or share and is involved in a conflict? Well, Mataji, that's a good question also. There are different things we can do, and one of the main ones that I use is something called a Watna. You see that there? Oh, thank you for putting the famous letter. Krishna Conscious Movement is meant for training men to be independently thoughtful and competent in all types of departments of knowledge and action, not for making bureaucracy. Thank you, Sadhu Jivan Prabhu. So to answer Mataji's question, this is a little advanced, not really advanced, but if someone's in a conflict with someone and they seem to be hesitant to talk about it or to get involved, then a Watna stands for, you ready for this? It's a little technical. The worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. And what that means in plain language is, if you don't try to settle this matter, what is your life going to be like? Right? So say it's a person who shares a room with you in the brahmachari ashram, and you're fighting with each other. So what is it going to be like if you don't address this conflict, but you're still fighting with him and you're sleeping in the same room as him for maybe the next 5 years? And sometimes spelling out the worst alternative makes people say, yeah, you're right. We should talk about this and work it out. Now, also to answer Mataji's question, sometimes somebody won't sit down with the other person, but we can talk to them individually. So ISKCON Resolve has trainings. This is a 4-hour training. We have a full 8-hour training called ISKCON Foundations. And we also do training for mediators and for ombuds. And if you're interested in doing that service or getting trained, you should contact me. There's my email address. And for the Foundations course, it is available for free on iskonresolve.in. I'll put that in the chat also. So you're going to, of course, in that you would hear a lot of what we've covered in the but it's more because it's twice as long. And the mediation course is there also, actually. So let us move on, though. Okay. Thank you for all those great questions. Damodar Leelapru, can you write it out? The worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you could type that in. Okay, I have to go back now. Oh yeah. So remember we read this yesterday? It's also kind of connected to Prabhupada's letter to Karandar. Oh, this is talking about people who have not become devotees yet. And this was about youth preaching in 1972. Now I understand that you may adjust it a little bit. Prabhupada's talking about America, you're preaching in India. Prabhupada's talking about 1972, you're in 2026. But I think some of the principles here of trying to understand another person's point of view, I like to consider it, if I'm preaching, especially one-on-one to someone, um, like sometimes like on a Sunday feast, we may give a person like a kind of Sunday feast talk, very general, and it's kind of like shooting a shotgun. I don't know if you know, a shotgun shoots out shrapnel in many pieces, and so it covers like an area, right? And so sometimes we close our eyes, we shoot some philosophy, and we hope something helps that person. But when you talk to the person, understand their needs, their interests, and concerns, then your preaching can be more like a laser. You take that part of the Krishna conscious philosophy that you know is part of what's affecting them, and it goes right to their heart. It can be more powerful. So listening also helps us a lot in knowing what to say, how to preach effectively. Just like when Prabhupada came to America, he wanted to learn as much as he could about America. Right? Even from like frozen vegetables that were in the freezer, right? He just wanted to learn because then he knew he could relate this ancient philosophy to the people that he was preaching to. Even he knew that many of the people who were coming to the temple at first on 26 Second Avenue were taking drugs, taking LSD. So they asked him, "What is Krishna consciousness like?" And he said, "It's like an ocean of LSD." So he took something that they could relate to. That Nyaya, that right? You see the moon through the branches. Something they could relate to, and he tried to help them understand Krishna consciousness in that way. So questions are so powerful, and listening is so powerful. After we ask the questions, then listening is such a powerful process, right? You have to, if you're going to ask questions, then you have to listen to what they say. Now you have to understand, Braja Bihari is not saying don't preach. All I'm saying is often by asking good questions and listening, we can be more effective preachers, or it can help our preaching. So what to avoid while listening? Has anyone ever done this? Think about what you will say next instead of listening to what they have to say. I think we all do that. It's very much pushed by the mode of passion. More sattvic is really just listening carefully to the person and relying on Krishna that he'll give us the Dhammi Buddhi Yogam Tvam. He'll give us the right things to say to help this person as long as if we listen to them carefully. And in that letter Prabhupada wrote to Balavanta Prabhu, he said, appreciating their point of view. So to appreciate someone's point of view, you have to listen. So we should try to avoid the Rajarsic process of thinking about what we're going to say next and really listen carefully. It's just like, I think we've all had the experience. Sometimes your mind is drifting. You're reading the Bhagavatam. You've read 2 pages and you don't remember anything. Right? So that's the mode of passion. We were thinking about something else, even though our eyes were going over the words. Or the mode of ignorance, we fall asleep while we're reading. Right? So listen, thinking about what others will say. Jumping to conclusions or premature judgment. And that could even be Vilas Prabhu's question. We think we know the person really well, so we don't really have to listen to them because we already figured them out. Well, people aren't machines, and sometimes they're dealing with something different than what we're aware of. So we're not talking about listening for hours and hours, but the idea is just to be curious a little bit longer. Avoiding in a mind criticisms and comparisons. I've been working on this in my own life. I used to tend to say, this is the best sabji I've ever tasted, or that was such a great lecture. That's the best lecture I've heard. Always making a comparison. So I'm really working on saying, that was a wonderful subject. That was a great class. I'm not comparing it to others by saying it's the best or the worst, but I found it to be helps me think a little bit more clearly by not being always in this comparison mode. All right. Giving premature advice. That's why we're saying we should give advice. We're preachers, but we should make sure that we are giving advice for the right problem. And have you ever been given advice that you didn't ask for? Does that ever happen to anyone here? Someone give you advice without that's if you really know the person well and you're friends and you trust their sincerity, that's okay. But sometimes we're thinking, this person's giving me advice. They have no idea what I'm going through. Why are they giving me advice? So be a little careful about premature advice. And moving to problem solving too fast. Sometimes a person needs to vent a bit, needs to get things off their chest. So we're not saying you shouldn't get to problem solving, but too fast can sometimes be a problem. Or talking about yourself too much. I don't know if you ever had that experience with someone. They just keep talking about themselves. And not paying attention to verbal and nonverbal cues. Remember, we already said this, that body language and tone of voice speak a lot. So when we're speaking to someone and we're listening, we're not only listening to the content, we're also listening to the intent. We're listening to what's behind their tone of voice. What is their body language? I mean, we do this naturally, but now we should be a little bit more aware of this. Okay? And all of these things can help us in our preaching. So what questions, comments, thoughts do you have about questions, about listening? Because Sundar Gopal Prabhu asked me to talk about communication skills. So these are the main communication skills: asking questions and listening. And it's such a shame, we go to school and we learn our maths, we learn our languages, we learn science, etc. But there's never a class on being a good listener. And it's probably one of the most important skills a person in their adult life, at least, needs to have. And many people are really bad listeners. They really don't listen carefully. And of course, we know as devotees that we're supposed to listen so carefully to the Shastra, so carefully to the sadhus, so carefully to the spiritual master. Our whole thing, Shravanam Kirtanam. So listening is, and before Kirtanam is Shravanam, right? So in one sense, before preaching is listening so that we can be like a laser and really help other people become devotees. Yes, Mataji? You have
Hare
your hand up?
Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, how to decide we should give them the solution or help them to find out the solution, because sometimes it happens that we give them solution and they do it, and after that they realize it was not working for them, so they either disconnect or they don't share anymore.
Yes. So what I usually do is I say, well, what solutions have you thought of so far? And if they come up with the same one that you were going to mention, then that's great. Hare Krishna, right? And then what I often do, it's a little subtle thing, but what I do is I say, I have some thoughts. Would you like to hear them? Because that way they're giving you permission. They're almost of course, many people, especially because you're preachers, they will ask you for your advice. But if a person does that early in the conversation, I say, well, first let me understand more clearly what's going on, right? Because like we said earlier, we want to give the right advice, right? So that's the first thing. And then sometimes even so after they explain things, I'll say, well, what have you done so far to do about this? What do you think you should do? Because sometimes, and I find this, well, I find it all over the world. I was going to say especially in India, but no, all over the world. People just kind of think they can just dump their problem on us, and then they have no responsibility anymore. It's all yours, right? Aravind Daksha Madhava Prabhu, this is now, I told you my problem. Now it's your problem to solve it. I have no responsibility anymore. It's all your fault. Some people kind of think like that. Oh, I told you the problem. Now, I can, not worry about it. So now you just tell me what to do. And if and it's all your fault if it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's like that, not always. So, but when I just say, I have some thoughts about that. Can I tell you? And of course they're going to say yes, especially if, and then you have, that little subtle thing means that they made the decision to hear your advice. And then, of course, you give your advice. So is that okay, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji, but sometimes as a leader, we do have this emotion of protecting them of upcoming, danger they could be landing in. So
Yes.
we give the solutions.
Yes, we're in the mood of protecting. That's good. But we also understand that, Krishna is the real protector. If you study carefully the 13th chapter of the first canto, there's a very, very good lessons in that chapter, right? Because in the beginning, in the first part of the chapter, Dhritarashtra's in Maya, we could say, because he's thinking that the Pandavas are maintaining him instead of the Lord is maintaining him, right? And Vidura has to preach so heavily to him. Let's get out of here. Don't depend. You're like a household dog eating the remnants of food offered by Bhima, who killed your 100 sons, right? So this illusion that we're maintained by someone else. But then what's really interesting is the second part of the chapter, where Yudhisthira, of course, he's a great devotee, but Yudhisthira's in Maya because he's thinking he's the maintainer, right? And then Narada Muni says, someone who's in the jaws of death, how can they relieve someone else from those jaws? And so Narada Muni's preaching so heavily to Yudhisthira. You're in Maya, you're thinking that, oh, how is Dhritarashtra and Gandhari going to be protected without me? Right? And Narada's saying, no, Krishna, right? Rakshisha titi vishvaso gotripte varanamtata, right? So that chapter, really, all of us study that chapter as preachers and understand that ultimately Krishna is the one who's guiding these people. And we pray to Krishna when we're preaching. We pray to Krishna to please help this devotee. Please help them become a devotee, like that. And if they're showing dependence on us, that's okay. But we also point to them that your real shelter, your ultimate shelter, is Krishna. Of course, we don't say we're not giving you shelter. We do give shelter, but in our mind, we're constantly remembering. Smartavya satatam Vishnu, that we should always remember. I'm dependent on Krishna. This person may be dependent on me. I'm dependent on my Guru Maharaj. I'm dependent on Krishna. I'm just trying to be an instrument. Is that all right, Mataji? Does that help?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Okay. I love the way all of you start your questions with sometimes, because you're hearing what I say and then you're thinking about situations in your own preaching and you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure if that will work. And that's okay. You may have to adjust what you're hearing because this is theoretical. And you have to also be practical. I once had a university professor who told me it's okay to have your head in the clouds as long as your feet are on the ground. So you have to take what we're talking about these 2 days and apply them in your service according to time, place, and circumstance. And I know I'm presenting some things that are a little different than the way we do, but I'm just following. I'm just a servant of Sundar Gopal Prabhu, and he asked me to talk about communication skills, so I'm doing that. Sadhu Jivan says, sometime, there you see he begins with sometimes. We assume or we know that this devotee is not going to be very potential for Krishna conscious preaching. So we don't want to listen too much, but she wants to tell or talk more. What to do in this situation? We used to have a principle on book distribution in the earlier days of book distribution, and that is we would spend as much time with the person to the extent that they're interested in bhakti. If we thought this person was, in those days, you have to understand things are different today. If we thought this person's going to come back to the temple with me and shave up, because that was our thing, we shaved people up like right away in the old days. I could spend hours with him. But I also, Prabhupada's famous statement about book distribution, he said, what will your 3-minute lecture do? But if you give them a book that's solid, they have that for life. So, yayatamam prapajante, Krishna says. So if we really think this person's just not interested and they want to talk to us about the latest, Bollywood movie or something like that, we say, okay, well, Prabhupada's secret was when he met someone like that, he would say, he'd say, bring prasad. And he just gave them prasadam and said, how are you, thank you for coming. And but he always, so the person who may not be so interested, maybe we give them a book. That's good for they give some donation. That's good for them. We maybe have some prasadam with us. We give them a sweet, and that's great because then that's still they're making spiritual advancement by taking prasadam, right? So yes, if we do have to make some assumptions, but the assumption should be based on some real knowledge. You might say to them, yeah, I know we could talk about Bollywood movies all day long. But I'm here, as you can see the way I'm dressed. Would you like to talk about Krishna? Would you like to talk about spiritual values? Would you like to talk about, understanding who you really are? And see if they're interested. So yes, we don't, we don't treat yayatamam prapad. Krishna doesn't treat everyone equally. Yayatamam prapajante tam sataiva bhajamyaham, right? I hope that's okay. Prabhuji, is there any course on handling disagreements respectfully? I'm hoping this is part of it. But yes, on that ISKCONResolve.in, there's more details there. But let's get to that. Let me just see if there's one more question, and then we'll talk about your question, Mataji. Yes, Vilas Papanab Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, my voice is audible?
Yeah, it's not great, but it's audible. Yes.
Yes, Prabhu. So,
आप
Prabhuji,
अपना एक
I
एक हेडफोन निकाल करके मुंह के पास ले करके बोलो.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Okay, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, is it audible?
Yes, go ahead, Prabhu.
So,
Boliye.
Prabhuji, like when we are in conversation with students, and like it seems that we have avoided, communication has been stopped, and because of some understanding, like you also said, that uh, let Krishna care him, another side of is that okay, he's not listening or we have some misunderstanding, leave it. So this situation has come. So now based on your experience, how we can restart the conversation? What can be a good way to restart or
So you've been preaching to
proactive?
someone, you've been preaching to
Yes,
someone, it's been going okay, and then at some point it stopped. Yeah.
yes.
What would you normally do in that situation?
Normally, first is that I take a break, and secondly is that maybe like after some time I can text him Hare Krishna or
Okay.
like that. Yes.
Okay. So that sounds like a good thing. You maybe ask them an open-ended question. I haven't heard from you for some time. How are things going in your life? Uh, um, how would you feel about us, talking sometime on WhatsApp or Zoom or in person, and see what they say. I mean, Maya is strong, right? So sometimes people just get swept away by Maya. But showing that personal concern can be very powerful. Yeah. So just remember open-ended questions, and yeah, and having a sincere interest in helping this person. Yeah. So is there any course on handling disagreements respectfully? Well, okay. Mataji asked a brilliant question. So we've talked a lot. We've talked about the different ways to handle a conflict, right? There was avoid, accommodate, compete, compromise, and collaborate. We didn't talk a lot about the details about collaboration. But we did, in one sense, if you remember, that collaboration or dealing respectfully is really trying to understand the other person's needs and interests and trying to address those. And at the same time, what we want to do when there's a conflict is we want to balance courage and consideration. What I mean by that is sometimes we get so into accommodating that we forget that there's some concerns that we have, right? And sometimes we're so like concerned about our needs and what we need, we forget that the other person may have needs. So finding that balance of expressing what's going on in our life and how this person is behavior is hurting us and that we want a change, and at the same time also understanding what's going on with them and what they want to see changed. So it's that balance of what I call courage and consideration. And we have a mediation course on iskonresolve.in that teaches that. And although better probably if you have an interest, send me an email. I sent you and we will be having a mediation course soon. And that you learn a lot more when you, obviously in this situation, when it's live, than when you're watching a recording. So I'm going to be doing it for India and that time zone, like India to Singapore to Australia, maybe not Australia, but Japan, China, Russia, those are all kind of that time zone instead of like the US and UK time zones. So that should be coming soon. So yes, there is a course on mediation, and even if you listen to the full foundations course, which is 8 hours, that is on iskonresolve.in, you'll get a lot more of that, Mataji. And you can just fast forward to the points that we've already covered here. So in one sense, you only have to listen to probably 4 hours of it because you've heard 4 hours of it already. Now, the last thing that Sundar Gopal Prabhu asked me to talk about was team building. And I developed a training on something called psychological safety. I developed it with Acharya Ratna Prabhu, if you know him. He's the temple president of Newtown in Calcutta. and also Rishi Kumar Prabhu. I think you all, of course, you all know him. And it's and some others, Sanatan Krishna Prabhu and Rohini helped design the course. So I was thinking of giving you we probably don't have time to cover everything, but I think we can cover the main points. And this is a lot about team building. It's about creating a mood, an atmosphere in a temple if you're a temple president, or in a team of youth preachers if you're doing that. And I think that's kind of what Sundar Gopal Prabhu requested of me. So, are you ready for that? Put on your seatbelts, and we will do that in just a minute. I just have to get the PowerPoint going. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Okay, so we're not gonna go into groups right now to do this, but if you can think of a time when you really felt secure in your service, you could voice your opinion, you could take some risk, do something creative maybe in preaching, even you could make mistakes without worrying about what others would say. So, if you could think about what that situation was, what did the leader do to create that feeling in you? How did you feel? How did it feel to be in that situation? And I think the answer we know is it felt really good, right? And whether the leader knew it or not, he was creating psychological safety. So here's a definition from the outside world, but it really is a key to an enlivening and productive devotee community. The feeling of trust and safety that allows us to speak up, reveal our mind, take risks, and make mistakes without fear of negative consequences. Okay, that's not so easy sometimes to have that mood of psychological safety in a team, in a group, in a temple. So why is it important? Devotees feel more engaged and motivated. They feel that their contribution matters. It leads to much better decision making because a good psychological safety leader asks other people sometimes for their opinions before they make a decision. And it creates this kind of culture of continuous learning and improvement, which is, that spiritually, that's us, right? Sadhana means practice, practice, practice. And we have our whole life of practice, continually learning and improving our devotional service. Now, psychological safety is not just being nice. It's not that there won't be any conflicts anymore. It's not that all ideas are fantastic. It's not that the leader just, lets people, slack off, not, be lazy, complain all the time, or just reveal their minds too much. TMI means too much information. So it's not those things. But what it does mean that if I make a mistake, it's not held against me forever and ever. I should learn from it. There's a saying that it's okay to make a mistake. You just should not make the same mistake twice. We should learn from our mistakes. Devotees are able to bring up problems and tough issues, and that's one of the reasons we created ISKCON Resolve, which remind me the last 5 minutes I should talk to you a little bit about ISKCON Resolve. It is safe for a devotee to take some risk for Krishna, not crazy risks, but like a new creative way to do youth preaching or to spread Krishna consciousness. It isn't difficult to ask other devotees for help. Right? Sometimes we keep problems to ourselves and we don't ask. So when there's a community, a group, a temple that has psychological safety, we don't mind saying, Prabhu, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? And working with devotees here, each individual feels reassured that his or her unique skills and talents are valued and utilized. And when that is obviously an important part of Varnashrama, right? That engaging people according to their natures. And so that their unique skills and talents, they're valued and they're used. Okay. So there's 5 steps. Establish a culture of respectful communication. A leader will provide maybe even different ways that devotees can give feedback and share their thoughts. We talked about open, you know about that by now. And communicate with some empathy, trying to, you know, it's like walking a mile in someone else's shoes, or taking off your chasma, your eyeglasses, and putting on someone else's eyeglasses and trying to see the world the way they see the world. That's what empathy is. And it means, and this is an interesting one for youth preachers, extending trust. Remember I told you about that monk, the Christian monk. And one of the things he did was in the beginning, there was, I wouldn't say there's very little trust, but people had to basically, I tell you what to do and you do it. And that was the way they trained monks. But then slowly, they gave them a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more trust that they could do things right. And slowly, giving them more trust and making them strong. And so that creates psychological safety. Being transparent as a leader. If there are, this is especially for temple prep, but also for youth preaching, if there are any changes to a program, it's better they don't find out about it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Inform the devotees about any changes. Or, when you make a decision, give some explanation about it. Right? Lots of times, the GBC or the Bureau or, somebody makes a decision and people say, oh, well, where did that come from? But it's good when we make a decision that we explain why we made it. Because that usually helps people understand, oh, they really did think about this deeply. And we share the good news and the bad news. Sometimes we just want to paint a pretty picture. But intelligent people know that there's more to it than a pretty picture. So sometimes it's someone asks me about the history of ISKCON. Sometimes I talk about the problems that we've had sometimes in the past with the zonal acharya system, and then I say, and this is what we did to correct it. And an intelligent person says, oh, well, that's okay. Yeah, it's yeah. So you had some problems, but you addressed them. That sounds intelligent. So, and then be very clear about expectations. There's nothing wrong as a person running youth preaching to be, we've talked all about being nice and listening. There's nothing wrong with having goals. Prabhupada had he said about book distribution, double it every year. Prabhupada was very result oriented, but result oriented with a Krishna conscious heart. So, being clear about what goals we have and being, yeah, that's good. And then you help the devotees reach the goal. If you're a leader, and even if you want people above you to think you're doing well, one of the best ways for people to think you're doing well if the people underneath you are doing well. And of course, the real the real Krishna conscious thing is to give them credit. If the person above you says, oh, you did really well, it's very good to pass that on to the other. Well, that's because the other devotees are so sincere in their youth preaching. And of course, to thank Krishna and Guru for these things, but to pass around the credit, there's nothing that gets devotees, some people in general, angry sometimes, is if the leader takes all the credit and that a lot of the brahmacharis did all the work. So giving credit is important. And being clear about how decisions are made. And then, we don't beat people up when they make a mistake. When we make a mistake, we own it. We said, Prabhus, I'm sorry, I made a mistake by suggesting we do this. That was wrong. I definitely won't make that mistake again. That kind of honesty, I know it's rare, but it's powerful. And if somebody made a mistake, you say, well, what do Prabhu, or you're talking to a youth, what have you learned from this? Remember, that's open-ended question. What have you learned from this? Right? And it can be very helpful in their Krishna consciousness. And risk taking, reasonable risk taking, not crazy risk taking, not, but reasonable risk taking. And be careful as a leader to place the blame. Again, you say you're the youth, you're in charge of youth preaching in your temple, and temple president, gets on your, chastises you for something. And sometimes you say, well, it's not my fault. It's all these preachers. They just don't listen to a word I say. So be careful about placing blame. There's a number of purports about this in the Bhagavatam, that a devotee, takes responsibility. And then take a supportive, whenever practical, make decisions in a team, collaboratively, at least consult with others. And be check in with the people that you're preaching to, like Vilas Prabhu said, he hasn't heard from someone in a while. So, I don't exactly know how the youth preaching goes. The only youth preaching I've done is preaching to the youth preachers, right? But not doing the actual youth preaching myself. I've given some classes at some IITs, but that's about it. But checking in with people who work under you is really, and checking in about their service, and even sometimes saying, and how are you doing? How's your sadhana? How's your consciousness? I do that in my, I think I mentioned I work for NASA. So I know, the top leaders in NASA, and sometimes I'm talking to them about a problem, and that's why they asked to speak to me. And at the end of that, I say, so how are you doing? And usually they say, I'm in charge of this. No one ever asked me that question. Thank you for asking me that question. And help devotees grow, send them to festivals, or of course, this is now this is a like personal advertisement here. Send them to the Govardhan Retreat Center. That's where I stay 6 or 7 months a year at Govardhan, the ISKCON Govardhan Retreat Center. And I'll just tell a funny thing about that. When Burijan Prabhu created the center there, and he was talking to His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj, and he told Gopal Krishna Maharaj, send the devotees to the retreat center, and Maharaj, don't worry, I will make sure I send them all back to Delhi. So they're not going to stay in Vrindavan. But seriously, yes, take care of their Krishna consciousness, and it is nice. We serve at the Govardhan. Please, we welcome devotees, and we'll give them a wonderful Krishna conscious experience if they come to Govardhan. But somehow or other, show your concern, especially for the preachers, right? Because they're the ones who are doing the work of yeah. So yes, encourage growth. So we won't do the poll, but if you think about it, on a scale of 1 to 10, after you just heard everything you heard, either in your department, and this was a class for temple presidents, so maybe it's better in your department. What is the level of 1 to 10? You don't have to write it in the chat, just in your mind. What do you think that is? Okay. Then the question would be, okay, what could you do to raise that 1 or 2 points? It doesn't mean if you said it was a 4, what could you do to make it a 10? That may be too much, but what could you make it a 5 or a 6? What strategies or actions could you do in your department to help create that safe environment? And again, if you want to put in the chat or just go off of mute, what are some things you think you might be able to do to improve psychological safety? There may be great psychological safety already, but what might we be able to do to increase that? Plan meeting periodically to discuss all issues having in mind by leaders or heads of departments, especially. Yes, Kavichandra Prabhu. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and then there's a whole art. By the way, I haven't taught this yet, but I want to teach a course on facilitation, how to run meetings. Organize seminars for leaders. Yes. More owning my mistake. Very good, Prabhu. More decisions with group, more retreats or free discussions with the team. Yes. Some sadhana retreats. Yeah, that's also wonderful. Sometimes, I think the North Indian leaders sometimes come to Govardhan or other places with His Holiness Brihat Bhagavat Maharaj, and they chant like some amazing number of rounds. you know, Together for 2 or 3 days. Yes, so sadhana retreats, more retreats or discussions with team. Yes, I like what Vilas Prabhuji wrote here. Yeah, encourage junior devotees to ask questions or suggestions for improvement. Yes, yes, Sumitra Prabhu. Establish devotee care department. Yep. Maximize time. It's miscommunication and misunderstanding, which needs deep talk and clarity. Kavi Chandraprabhu, this is brilliant. Very good. I mean, all of these are brilliant, but let's talk about that for a second. It's true. Taking time to have conversations and listen to somebody else takes time. But it's kind of proactive because it saves so much time in the future when you're dealing with conflicts because of miscommunication and misunderstanding. So it's a very kind of sattvic thing to do it ahead of time. A very good point. By appreciating the devotees who raise questions and share their thoughts. Yes. Now it doesn't mean there's some rascals that go on the internet and just raise da 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 and so we're not talking about those few people that don't really have that sincerity, but in general, appreciating devotees who raise questions. Of course, questions should be raised respectfully, and we should encourage questions, in the proper mood, but still we should encourage, yeah. Mataji writes, by appreciating the devotees who raise questions and share their thoughts, yes. Sukanya Gopi Mataji says, contribute by becoming a person whom devotees feel safe approaching with their questions. Yes, we talked about that yesterday, teaching by example, and just being that kind of person that is open. Sometimes you can just open the door. You can sometimes see a devotee who just, how Prabhupada says the face is the index of the mind. He said that. So sometimes you can see when a person is upset about something. And so sometimes you can just, what we say, like open the door. Prabhu, it looks like, you have something in your mind. If you ever want to talk about it, let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So just being there, we're talking about youth preaching, but we also remember that another famous letter in 1974, I think it was. It could have been 72. Someone could check. where Prabhupada says, now we have enough devotees. Now it's time to boil the milk. Right? So it's not that Prabhupada was saying stop preaching, but he was making the point that you probably have seen this dynamic. I assume it's there even in youth preaching. It was definitely there in the early days of ISKCON. We were super nice to people when they were becoming a devotee. Really, really nice. Bring them Mahaprasadam and and then once they got initiated, it was like, horrible. They're okay. They're fine. So the boil of milk also is taking care of the devotees we have. Because when our devotees become advanced in Krishna consciousness, that really affects the preaching in the best way. We're not just the International Society for spreading the International Society for Krishna consciousness. We are the International Society for Krishna consciousness. So we want to make sure that our devotees are advancing. And now we have the psychological safety guru with us, Rishi Kumar Prabhu. He says, this is my thing. So Rishi Kumar Prabhu, if anytime you want to add something, please feel free.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So nice to see
Thank you for adding value to my life.
So contribute by becoming a person. Yes, I'm just finishing what Mataji wrote here. And different opinions while keeping our discussions grounded in Shastra and Vaishnava principles. Yes, I hope it's been clear that there's so many ways that, I've been expressing some things that are in some ways modern psychological thought, but I hope it's clear that they're grounded in Shastra. And even Prabhupada's letter to Balavanta Prabhu that was written in 1972, right? That became something in the corporate world in the 80s and 90s. Prabhupada was ahead of his time. Someone made millions and millions of dollars by writing a book that said, seek first to understand, then be understood. And Prabhupada wrote that to Balavanta Prabhu in 1972. Prabhupada was way ahead of his time in so many ways. So thank you for that. Feedback forms. Yes, Raghav Prabhu, that can sometimes be helpful. Anonymous feedback forms it can be good. I'll just tell you a little story about feedback. I used to, of course, I've given seminars for many years in ISKCON. By the way, do you know when the first seminar was ever taught in ISKCON? It was 1987. Before 1987, no one thought about retreats. There was no retreats. There was no systematic classes. There was no Bhakti Shastri. There was no Bhakti Vaibhav. None of these things. 1987 was the first time we actually, started giving seminars and things. And it started with the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, actually. And then, of course, now it's common, right? But I used to, do the normal thing on a scale of 1 to 5. Was a speaker well versed? Did he cover the topics? Was he was he entertaining? Whatever you would say, right? And I read them, but it didn't really help me that much. But then I started saying, the feedback I asked was, please write one thing that you think that the speaker could improve. And that gave me so much information. That open-ended question, by the way, gave me so much information. Otherwise, people would usually, yeah, it was great, it was wonderful, horrible, but one thing I can improve, that not, out of 25 people, maybe there was 5 or 10 really great ideas there. And that really helps. So feedback forms, yes. And Raghav Prabhu, if you're going to do that, you might do even a AI search or something, how to create good feedback forms. Yeah. Creating platforms and encouraging devotees to share their challenges, yes. try to correct wrongdoers by first mentoring their positive nature and then mention improvements. Yes, of course, Sumitra Krishna Prabhu is another very senior devotee that we have with us. My gosh, we're very fortunate to have him. And
Hare
he's
Krishna, Hare.
Krishna
Yeah,
Sumitra ji.
yeah,
Yes, I'm
Haribol.
so happy to hear your voice. Yes, I think we have that. Do we have a slide on that? Give me a second here. Oh no, we don't have a slide here. But there's different ways to change others. I think we all know probably the hardest thing to do in this world is to change someone else. We have enough trouble changing ourselves, right? What to speak of changing someone else? But one of the ways is it's considered, and Prabhupada used this a lot, and that is to show appreciation and reinforce good behavior. When someone's doing something really well, you point it out to them. You catch someone doing well. And you have to, one of the important things here is you have to be specific. This is about feedback, and so I'm really glad that Raghav Prabhu brought this up about feedback. When you're giving feedback to someone, it's really helpful to be specific. Because if you say, that was great, what you did is wonderful, that's very general, and sometimes the devotee can just become complacent. But when you say, you spent that extra time with those youth and they appreciated it so much, and now 4 of them come to the temple regularly, and it was because you put in that extra effort, then you're being more specific. And then what happens? The person wants to repeat that, right? And if you're giving negative feedback and you're general, it doesn't help. You really messed up that time. Get it together, Prabhu. This is not fun and games. This is spreading Krishna consciousness. That usually that just makes a person a little depressed. But if you say, when you just, all the youth were lined up for prasadam, and when you just went in front and then sat by yourself and didn't engage with them, that's just didn't give off the right vibe. And that usually, when you're specific, it's very likely that person's not going to do that again. They're going to want to improve. So giving feedback that's specific, and that's why lots of those on a scale of 1 to 5 didn't help me at all. But then when I asked, tell me one thing I can improve, that's asking for something specific. Okay? So, and the worst thing, the worst kind of feedback is to reward bad behavior, right? Or sometimes reward it and sometimes chastise it, and then the person has no idea where this leader is at, right? Let's see, Sumitra. So thank you so much for that, Sumitra Prabhu. And that, yes, he talks about the sandwich theory, that you begin with something someone did well, then you talk about some room for improvement, and then you end with something they did well. And that generally the theory is that makes the ego easier to accept what you didn't do well and want to change. So thank you. And then Mataji wrote, if leader responds constructively to vulnerability, listen without judgment, and treat mistakes as shared learning opportunities rather than faults to punish. Yes. And vulnerability, it doesn't mean you have to cry in front of the devotees or tell them all of your problems. It basically just means that you're ready to roll up your sleeves and work with them to solve challenges. There's a whole class we could give on vulnerability. I gave a talk recently on the power of apology, because when you think about how many apologies are in the Shastra, right? There's so many, isn't it? I mean, of course, the famous ones of Indra and Brahma, but there's so many apologies when you think about it. It's actually when you see something that's repeated again and again and again in the Shastra, we can understand that's an important thing for us to consider in our own lives. So we don't have time today for this, but even when we do, like we said, when we make a mistake, and even sometimes we might apologize to someone younger than us, even to a youth, if we messed up. Prabhupada was so humble that he was saying, in that I think it's fourth canto purport, he said, if one of my disciples becomes a pure devotee, then he will be able to deliver me back to Godhead. Prabhupada wrote that. Maybe it was in Chaitanya Charitamrita, actually. Yes, Sumitra Prabhu also writes, give first training and then delegate the services. Yes, leaders should be trained to receive criticism without becoming defensive or retaliatory. That's huge. That's huge, because that fear of defensiveness and retaliatory is one of the things that kills psychological safety. Right? Rishi Kumari Prabhu, you want to add to that?
I'm just thinking that when Srila Prabhupada highlighted the point about Puniti being on the plane and Dhruv Maharaj actually saying, where she is going, you want to look out for her. That's when he highlights his point about the spiritual master be most, if he finds an eminently qualified disciple. The whole challenge to psychological safety is because if you find someone really qualified, then there is a tendency to stifle criticism and feedback in the first case, because then you are seen as someone trying to uproot you from where you are. So it depends a lot on the security of the person for him to give psychological safety. How internally psychologically safe are you before you impart psychological safety to others? If you're psychologically safe inside, then you can give psychological safety others. Over.
I told you he was a psychological safety guru. That's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point. Yeah, it's the cliche. It's very cliche, but it's the idea that on the airplane where they tell you to first put the mask on the child before you put it, first put it on yourself before you put it on the child, because you can't help the child if you can't breathe. Right. So thank you so much for that. Natvar wrote, we should go in details of any conflicts and concerns rather than just assuming and taking decisions or coming to conclusions. Yes, we often have to, really understand the root cause, and not only root cause, but what's going on in the person's mind, because what do they say? I'm trying to remember that saying. It's not. Maybe you could help me, Sumitra Krishna Prabhu or Rishi Kumar Prabhu. A person's reality is, you don't see things as they are. You see things as you are.
You are.
Yes, yes. And, so that we see so much in conflicts. People can be looking at the same situation and two totally different angles, right? And Rishi Kumar Prabhu writes, catch people doing the right thing and glorify specifically. Yes. And Kanchan writes, becoming one less problem ourselves for others, the community. Yeah. Sometimes, Sumitra Krishna Prabhu writes, sometimes leaders, when not able to change a devotee directly, they can change the environment around them. Yes. The example I like to give is if you're going to a festival and they put you in a room with a devotee who snores very loudly and you can't sleep. So you have three choices. You can try to change them, roll them over or something like that, right? Wake them up and say, Prabhu, you're snoring, change the environment, maybe go to the roof and put up a mosquito net and sleep on the roof, or get earplugs, right? Or you can change yourself and you can say, well, this isn't so bad. I can stay up all night and chant 64 rounds. This is Krishna's mercy. So you have those three choices. And Sumitra Krishna Prabhu is bringing up two of them: change the other person and change the environment. Very good. And Kavi Chandra Prabhu writes, every temple should have a genuine panel-like grievance suggestion cell where any devotee can speak very openly its issues directly to the cell instead of whispering each other and telling others to make its public news with adding more spices. Okay, well, that is Kavi Chandra Prabhu. You have just, they call it a segue, or you've just given me the greatest opportunity. But I'm not sure if I should explain it or if Rishi Kumar Prabhu, a little bit about the Ombuds program and ISKCON Resolve Bharat.
You should start, and I can
Okay, all right. So Kavi Chandra Prabhu, we
because
do
you
have
started it because you started it all.
Okay. Kavi Chandra Prabhu, we do have such a system. It is it's still in its infancy, or it's still developing. But the idea of an ombuds is someone that anyone can talk to about any concern, about any, as you put, grievance, suggestion, conflict that they're having, and know that the conversation is completely confidential. The ombuds has taken a vow of confidentiality, and they're neutral. They don't take your side or another person's side, but they just are neutral, which really helps deal with the situation. And it's an informal, off-the-record conversation where a number of different options are discussed with the ombuds on how to address that grievance, that concern, that conflict. And we have now, I think, 18. Is that right? Well, we have a number of
Now
devotees.
it's 21. Now it's 21.
21. We have 21 devotees in Bharat that have been trained and to do this service, and we're trying to make. And eventually, it would be great, like you were saying, Kavi Chandra Prabhu, to have devotees like that locally also in each temple. But dire, slowly we're developing this. What would you like to add, Rishi Kumar Prabhu?
So the important point is that we are talking about institutionalizing people revealing their heart. So that's going to be a challenge, because revealing the heart is a matter of personal priority and personal choice. And when we try to bring in a system that institutionalizes that, people may just get put off. So that's really the challenge, that someone who is there is not a management stooge, and someone who can actually be someone who can hear you out and come up with, help you come up with options, whatever, independent, voluntary, spontaneous opinions, and help them grow. So that's really the challenge for us before we institutionalize anything. And for that, I think the more people who get trained, the collective consciousness will spread.
Wow, that's real. I noted that down. That institutionalizing, revealing their heart. I had never heard that one before. That's that's what we're trying to do, and it's not easy. Sumitra Krishna Prabhu, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I agree with Rishi Kumar Prabhu that every center should have, like a department we have, TD department and fundraising department. There should be a department where devotees can freely go there and open up and express. Many devotees keep inside their heart. They're out of fear. And one fine day they blast. So initially, when things are there to correct them, this will be very helpful.
Yes.
Nipping
And
at
we
the
also
prevention.
And we've also trained, so we have that as ombuds, and we also have mediators. That's when two devotees are in conflict, and we've trained devotees to bring them together and help them work out the conflict. And we have, quite a number of devotees in Bharat who have been trained. And as Rishi Kumar Prabhu pointed out, we are willing to do more training in the India time zone. Of course, everything these days is generally done by Zoom. Although I would love to sometime do a training at the Govardhan Retreat Center and host that and have devotees come for that. That would be really special and wonderful. So questions, comments on psychological safety or what we just heard about ombuds and mediation and trying to institutionalize revealing our hearts? I love that. Question from Vilas Padmanabh. If someone has put faith on me, how to deal with them from my side? What steps should we take? Oh, losing faith. Oh, well, let's see. Let me think about that. Is Rishi? I think he may have had to go, Rishi Kumar Prabhu, because he knows more about youth preaching than me. Yeah, I think he left. Well, one thing is we have to be a little in a healthy way detached, right? A little bit like Yudhisthira, like the way Narada preached to Yudhisthira Maharaj in the 13th chapter of the first canto. You know, we can't save everyone. You know I have so many friends who are gurus, and you know, it hurts, it breaks their hearts sometimes when a disciple stops chanting or, you know, leaves ISKCON or goes to another movement or just goes back to the material world, right? And we heard stories of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, you know, having, you know, experiencing that, and, you know, so it does pain the heart, no doubt. But we also have to be, you know, we have to go on with our service. I mean, one thing is maybe there's another preacher that they would have more faith in. So, you know, we can encourage that, and don't be attached to, oh no, they have to, you know, be dependent upon me. And just like sometimes fundraisers will say, oh, that's my donor, right? Like we own that donor. But no, if you know, if you're attracted to another preacher, Ram, you know, don't let our ego get in the way. What we want to do is what's best for them, right? But we also may be introspective. Is there, you know, for the future going forward, I wonder if there's something I did that I could do better next time. That's another consideration. And another one is see if they'll be open to talk to us. You know, I either you told me or I get the impression that you've lost faith in me. You know, what happened? Let me know how I can improve. You know, you know, that takes a lot of humility. And that may not be practical in youth preaching today in India, but that's, you know, there's different ways, I guess, to deal with it. Let me ask, there's a lot of other youth preachers here. What would you do if, oh, Rishi, you're here. Rishi Kumar, do you have any other comments on that question in the chat? If someone has put faith on, but then they've lost faith, what they could do?
Someone's putting faith in us and they've lost faith in us?
Yeah. What is it? Let's see how you actually word. If someone has put faith on me, how to deal with them from my side, oh no, has lost faith in me, how to deal with them from my side, what steps should we take? So you're a youth preacher and someone you've been preaching to for some time, they lose faith in you.
So it said just we looked at from both points, but you trained me in psychological safety. I would first try and introspect as to where I made a mistake. That so-and-so who had faith in me didn't have the courage to speak up when he found something wrong, or to point out something or clarify something, and instead just went into a shell. Because he probably didn't find the courage to even tell me. I came to know through someone else eventually that he's lost faith in me. Because very few people actually walk up to you and say that I've lost faith in you, unless you've given them that level of freedom. But assuming you have given them the level of freedom also, the opportunity we have is to protect the person. So therefore, we should look at whoever has faith in him. And just like Indra went with the Surabhi cow, or Jarasandha sent the Brahmanas in front of him in the front of the battle, someone with whom this person has some amount of faith or can look up to should be used to help. And that could be ombuds. That could be our ombuds. It need not be an ombuds, but someone who can get through to this person, because currently this person will not be receptive. He will be impervious to whatever you tell him or ask of him. So you will need someone who can make this person open up. And that's where someone like us as ombuds comes in. This part of the program brought to you by ISKCON Resolve.
Thank you for that paid political announcement. And our other expert here, Sumitra Krishna Prabhu, said, I respect your trust, but I want you to make your own informed decision. If this person knew exactly how I was handling their trust, would they still feel safe having trusted me? So Prabhus, Prabhus and Matajis, I want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, these 4 hours, to get your association. We are here to serve at ISKCON Resolve. You can go to iskonresolve.org or .com to contact us directly. The trainings that I mentioned are on iskonresolve.in. And I gave you my email address if you want to take some further training, and we'll pass it on to the ISKCON Bharat team. And again, I just want to thank Sundar Gopal Prabhu for arranging for this, and our Arvind Daksha Madhava Prabhu for doing the heavy lifting of organization. I think Vilas Padmanabh Prabhu also may have done some of the organizing, so thank you. And like we said yesterday, it's always good to end a little early. So Arvind Daksha Prabhu, did you want to say any last things before we end?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, first of all, for taking out your precious time and sharing some of the very general mistakes that we do during our preaching activities, and also resolving the chats which devotees are asking in the chat box. So, and very maturely. And it's all the session from iceberg principle to the empathic listening to the psychological thing we have discussed, psychological safety. So these all things are very, very helpful for all of us. And devotees are requested to kindly go through that iskonresolve.in. I have checked it out and I have shared the link also with all the devotees. It's foundation course, then mediation course, and ombudsman course to be announced. So foundation course, mediation course is already there, and very beautiful slides. I was going through that. Slides were there, recorded sessions were there. So kindly go through that, and we can all get more details there. And very, very thankful to you, Prabhuji, and very, very thankful to Rishi Kumar Prabhuji as well, Sumitra Krishna Prabhuji as well, for giving your association, and all the devotees for hearing very patiently. Thank you all. So,
And I just have two more last things to say. Is that all right, Prabhu?
yes, Prabhuji,
please, if you haven't done it, please read the Prabhupada quotes. And if you have done it, really take them to heart. Prabhupada was very, 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 very concerned that devotees were fighting with each other, and that we should work out our differences. And then I hope you got a chance to listen to Brahmatirtha Prabhu. I sent you that clip. It was very informative. I hope you found it informative of how Srila Prabhupada dealt with conflicts. So refer to those every now and then. They're helpful. So please accept my most humble obeisances, Prabhujis. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha, kripa sindhu bhyevacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo, namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. North India Youth Preachers ki jai.
His
Go
Grace
Premanand.
Braja Bihari Prabhu ki jai.
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्णा
सभी भक्तों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। सभी भक्तों को लिंक भी शेयर कर दिया गया है ग्रुप में, और आज की क्लास की रिकॉर्डिंग भी आप सभी को शेयर कर दी जाएगी। कृपया करके आप सभी उसको सुने और ज्यादा से ज्यादा सुन करके लाभ उठाएं। आप सभी का धन्यवाद। हरे कृष्ण।